What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the We Fought Back series, where today we will be discussing the Nat Turner Rebellion. Nat Turner's Rebellion, historically known as the Southampton Insurrection, was a rebellion of enslaved Virginians that took place in Southampton County, Virginia in August 1831. Led by Nat Turner, the rebels killed between 55 and 65 white people, making it the deadliest slave revolt for white people in the U.S. history. The rebellion was effectively suppressed within a few days at Belmont Plantation on the morning of August 23rd, but Turner survived in hiding for more than 30 days afterwards. There was widespread fear amongst white population in the aftermath of the rebellion. Militia and mobs killed as many as 120 enslaved people and free African Americans in retaliation. After trials, the Commonwealth of Virginia executed 56 enslaved people accused of participating in the rebellion, including Turner himself. Many blacks who had not participated were also persecuted in the frenzy. Because Turner was educated and was a preacher, Southern state legislatures subsequently passed new laws prohibiting the education of enslaved people and free blacks, restricting rights of assembly and other civil liberties for free blacks, and requiring white ministers to be present at all worship services. Lonnie Bunch, director of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, said, "The Nat Turner Rebellion is probably the most significant uprising in American history." Turner began communicating his plans to a small circle of trusted fellow slaves. All his initial recruits were other slaves from his neighborhood. These scattered men had to find ways to communicate their intentions without revealing the plot. Songs may have tipped the neighborhood members to movements. It is believed that one of the ways Turner summoned fellow conspirators to the woods was through the use of particular songs. According to author Terry Bisson, Turner entrusted his wife with his most secret plans and papers. In a report by James Tresvant, immediately following the uprising, Cherry was mentioned as having said that Nat was digesting a plan for the revolt for years. Turner eagerly anticipated God's signal to slay my enemies with their own weapons. He began preparations for an uprising against the slaveholders in Southampton County. Turner said, "I communicated the great work and laid out to do to four in whom I had the greatest confidence, fellow slaves Henry, Hark, Nelson, and Sam." Beginning in February 1831, Turner interpreted atmospheric conditions as signs to prepare for the revolt. An annular solar eclipse on February 12, 1831 was visible in Virginia and much of the southeastern United States. Turner envisioned this as a black man's hand reaching over the sun. Illness prevented Turner from starting the rebellion as planned on Independence Day, July 4, 1831. The conspirators used the delay to extend planning. On August 13th, an atmospheric disturbance made the Virginia sun appear bluish-green, possibly the result of a volcanic plume produced by the eruption of the Ferdinandria Island off the coast of Sicily. Turner took this, like the other earlier eclipse, as a divine signal and started the rebellion a week later on August 21st. The rebellion expanded from several trusted slaves to over 70 enslaved and free blacks, some of whom were on horseback. They were armed with knives, hatchets, and blunt instruments. Firearms were too difficult to collect and would have drawn unwanted attention. The rebels killed white people without discriminating age or sex. Turner's slave owner and his family were the first to be killed. The rebels then traveled from house to house, freeing slaves and killing whites. Historian Stephen B. Oates states that Turner called on his group to kill all the white people. According to a newspaper, Turner declared that indiscriminate slaughter was not their intention after they attained a foothold, and was resorted to in the first instance to strike terror and alarm. A few homes were spared because Turner believed the poor white inhabitants thought no better of themselves than they did of Negroes. The rebels also avoided the Giles Reese plantation, even though it was en route, likely because Turner wanted to keep his wife and children safe. Nat Turner confessed to killing only one person, who was Margaret Whitehead, whom he killed with a blow from a fence post. The last to be attacked was the Rebecca Vaughn house. The rebels killed approximately 60 people before being defeated by the state militia. The militia had twice the manpower and 3 companies of artillery. Turner thought that revolutionary violence would force whites to acknowledge the brutality of slavery. Turner said he wanted to spread terror and alarm among whites. Within a day of suppressing the rebellion, the local militia was joined by detachments from the USS Natchez and the USS Warren in Norfolk, and militias from neighboring counties in Virginia and North Carolina. Brigadier General William Henry Broadnax commanded the Virginia militia. In Southampton County, blacks suspected of participating in the rebellion were beheaded by the militia, and their severed heads were mounted on poles at crossroads as a grisly form of intimidation. A local road, now Virginia State Route 658, was called Blackhead Signpost Road after it became the site of one such display. Rumors quickly spread that the slave revolt had spread as far as south as Alabama. Fears led to reports in North Carolina of slave armies on highways burning and massacring the white inhabitants of Wilmington, North Carolina, and marching on the state capitol. The fear and alarm resulted in white violence against blacks on flimsy pretenses. The editor of the Richmond Whig described the scene as the slaughter of many blacks without trial and under circumstances of great barbarity. The violence continued for 2 weeks after the rebellion. General Epps ordered a halt to the killing. He will not specify all the instances that he is bound to believe had occurred, but passed in silence what has happened, with the expression of his deepest sorrow that had any necessity should be supposed to have existed to justify a single act of atrocity, but he feels himself bound to declare and hereby announces to the troops and citizens that no excuse will be allowed for any similar acts of violence after the promulgation of this order. In a letter to the New York Evening Post, Reverend G.W. Powell wrote that many Negroes are killed every day. The exact number will never be known. A company of militia from Hertford County, North Carolina, reportedly killed 40 blacks in one day and took $23 and a gold watch from the dead. Captain Solon Borland, leading a contingent from Murfreesboro, North Carolina, condemned the acts because it was a tantamount to theft from the white owners of the slaves. Modern historians concur that the militias and mobs killed as many 120 blacks, most of whom were not involved with the rebellion. Turner eluded capture for 6 weeks but remained in Southampton County. According to author Terry Bisson, Turner's wife Cherry was beaten and tortured in an attempt to get her to reveal his plans and whereabouts. Following a raid on the Reese plantation, the Richmond Constitutional Whig reported on September 26, 1831, that some papers were given up by his wife under the lash. According to the authentic and impartial narrative, also published in 1831, journal entries belonging to Turner were in her possession after Nat's escape. On October 30, 1831, a farmer named Benjamin Phipps discovered Turner hiding in Southampton County in a depression in the earth, created by a large fallen tree covered with fence rails around 1 p.m. on October 31st. Turner arrived at the prison in Jerusalem. While awaiting trial, Turner confessed knowledge of the rebellion to attorney and slave apologist Thomas R. Gray. Dozens of suspected rebels were tried by courts specially convened for the rebellion. Turner was tried on November 5, 1831 for conspiring to rebel and making insurrection, and was convicted and sentenced to death. His attorney was James Strange French. James Tresvant served on the jury. Turner was hanged on November 11, 1831 in the county seat of Jerusalem, Virginia, now known as Cortland. According to some sources, he was beheaded to deter further rebellion. The body was dissected and flayed, and the skin used to make souvenir purses. In October 1897, Virginia newspapers reported that the skeleton was being used as a medical specimen by Dr. H.U. Stevenson in Tawana, Virginia. Most of Turner's alleged conspirators were tried in the Southampton County, and some trials occurring in neighboring Sussex County or other nearby counties. French represented many of the defendants along with William Henry Broadnax and Meriwether Broadnax. 30 slaves were convicted, of which 18 were hanged and 12 were sold out of state. 15 were acquitted. 4 of the 5 free blacks tried were acquitted, the 5th was hanged. During the rebellion, the Virginia General Assembly targeted free blacks with an African relocation bill and a police bill denying them trials by jury and criminal punishment by slavery and relocation. The VGA received petitions from at least 7 slave owners asking to be compensated for slaves lost without trial because of the insurrection. They were all rejected. The VGA debated the future of slavery the following spring. Some urged gradual emancipation, but the pro-slavery side prevailed after Virginia's leading intellectual Thomas Roderick Dew, president of the College of William and Mary, published a pamphlet defending the wisdom and benevolence of slavery and the folly of its abolition. Laws were passed in all slave states except Maryland, Kentucky, and Tennessee, criminalizing teaching blacks to read and write, and restricting blacks from holding religious meetings without a licensed white minister. Other southern slaveholding states also enacted legal restrictions on black activities. Possession of abolitionist publications was criminalized in Virginia and other southern states. On September 3, 1831, William Lloyd Garrison published an article called The Insurrection, in the abolitionist newspaper The Liberator. In September 10, 1831, The Liberator published excerpts from a letter to the editor saying that many people in the South believed the newspaper had a link to the revolt, and that if Garrison were to go to the South, he would not be permitted to live long. He would be taken away and no one is of the wiser for it. If Mr. Garrison were to go to the South, he would be dispatched immediately, an opinion expressed by persons at the South repeatedly. In November 1831, Thomas R. Gray published The Confessions of Nat Turner based on research while Nat Turner was in hiding, and from conversations with Turner before the trial, the pamphlet sold 40,000 to 50,000 copies, making it a noted source about the rebellion at the time. However, a November 25, 1831 review of the publication by the Richmond Enquirer says, "The pamphlet has one defect, we mean its style. The confession of the culprit is given, as it were, from his lips, and when read to him, he admitted its statements to be correct, but the language is far superior to what Nat Turner could have employed. Portions of it are even eloquently and classically expressed. That is calculated to cast some shade of doubt over the authenticity of the narrative and to give the bandit a character for intelligence which he does not deserve and ought to not have received. In all other respects, the confessions appear to be faithful and true." Gray's work is the primary historical document regarding Nat Turner, but some modern historians, specifically David F. Augmentinger Jr., have also questioned the validity of his portrayal of Turner. In the aftermath of the revolt, whites did not try to interpret Turner's motives and ideas. Antebellum slave owners were shocked by the rebellion and feared further slave violence. To them, Turner became a symbol of terrorism and violent retribution. Northern and southern states shared many of the same fears. A proposal to create a college for African Americans in New Haven, Connecticut was overwhelmingly rejected in the New Haven excitement. The fear caused by Turner's rebellion and the concerns raised in the emancipation debates that followed resulted in politicians and writers defining slavery as a positive good. Thomas Dew was among those writers. Other Southern writers began to promote a paternalistic ideal of improved Christian treatment of slaves, in part to avoid such rebellions. Dew and others believed that they were civilizing blacks who were then still mostly American-born through slavery. The writings were collected in the pro-slavery argument as maintained by the most distinguished writers of the Southern states. Black Americans have generally regarded Turner as a resistance hero for avenging the suffering of Africans and African Americans. James H. Harris, who has written extensively about the history of the black church, says that the revolt marked the turning point in the black struggle for liberation. According to Harris, Turner believed that only a cataclysmic act could convince the architects of a violent social order that violence begets violence. In an 1843 speech at the National Negro Convention, Henry Highland Garnett, a former slave and active abolitionist, described Nat Turner as patriotic, saying that future generations will remember him among the noble and the brave. In 1861, Thomas Wentworth Higginson, a white Northern writer, praised Turner in a seminal article published in the Atlantic Monthly. He described Turner as a man who knew no book but the Bible, and that by heart, who devoted himself soul and body to the cause of his race. In 1988, Turner was included in the Black American of Achievement biography series for children with the book Nat Turner, Slave Revolt Leader by Terry Bisson. The book's introduction was written by Coretta Scott King. The sword believed to have been used by Turner in the rebellion is displayed at the Southampton County Courthouse. In 1991, the Virginia Department of Historic Resources dedicated the Nat Turner Insurrection Historical Marker on Virginia Route 30 near Cortland, Virginia. In December 2021, the Virginia Department of Cultural Resources dedicated the Blackhead Signpost Road Historic Marker. Nat Turner's Rebellion is celebrated as part of Black August. And in 2016, actor and director Nate Parker produced a film called Birth of a Nation that spoke about the insurrection of 1831. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to conclude this week's episode of the We Fought Back series, where it's talking about the Nat Turner Rebellion or the Southampton Insurrection. Be sure, if you have not done so already, to go ahead and check the We Fought Back series playlist to get caught up or recap previous episodes that were discussed. And also be sure to tune in next week for the next episode of the We Fought Back series. Be safe and be one.